Washington Journal continues.
And now joining us on the Washington Journal is Representative Gwen Moore, a Democrat of Wisconsin, a member of the Budget Committee, a member of the Financial Services Committee. Gwen Moore, how did you vote yesterday on the budget deal?
I voted yes.
Why?
I did. Well, I think that many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle have learned a tremendous method about being dug in and not wanting to make compromise. We saw the government shut down. We saw a great deal of economic harm done to the country, harm done to our constituents, be they Democrats or Republicans. They're our constituents, and they suffered. And so I think many of us learned a lesson about being dug in ideologically and not doing what democracy calls for, and that is finding some common ground. And I do want to laud Representative Paul Ryan, the chairman of the Budget Committee, and Senator Murray in the Senate, because they really did some hard work coming to this deal and really standing up to their various conferences, because there's much to be criticized about the deal.
Walking into the vote, had you already made up your mind, or could you have switched at the last minute?
No, I had pretty much made up my mind. I can tell you I was inspired to do so, quite frankly. I was on a plane coming from South Africa to memorialize Nelson Mandela, President Nelson Mandela, and started getting scant reports, given the limited Wi-Fi availability on this 20-hour ride, that the Koch brothers and the all of these, sort of right-oriented entities were coming out against the deal, and so that led me to believe that there was something at least looking at the fact that they, without even peeling back the layers of the deal, had decided that it wasn't any good. So I decided to look at it, and I saw Paul Ryan being defensive about it. So that told me right away that my colleague, also from Wisconsin, was really taking some of the blows, and I thought this was really worthwhile looking into.
Well, on the left, several, 32 Democrats voted against the bill, including some of your colleagues such as Karen Bass and Judy Chu, John Conyers, Sander Levin, ranking member of the Ways and Means Committee, Raul Grijalva, chair of the House Progressive Caucus. How much swaying was done inside the Democratic caucus?
Actually, there was no whipping on the part of the Progressive Caucus against this deal. But I did have a good talk with Keith Ellison, who's co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, and I do not fault them for voting against the deal. There were no benefits for extended unemployment benefits. There are over 1 million people who are going to lose benefits starting December 31st, and it's going to reduce our economy because of it. These people will not have not only money to sustain themselves, but won't have money to put back into the economy. We've extended unemployment. I can't count the numbers of times since the 60s that we've extended unemployment without any with any offsets. And so it's just cruel and very, here at Christmas time, certainly very Scrooge-like not to have done this. And then again, we're dinging federal employees once again. New hires starting January 1st, 2014 will find the federal pension contribution, over 10 years, which is going to be $12 billion, taken away from them. And I hope that we will not suffer from in our ability to recruit the kind of talented staff that both Democrats and Republicans enjoy in federal government. I think if people out there will recall, when we have natural disasters, when we have Social Security benefits being determined, I think people during some of our major crises have seen the importance of competent government. For those people who believe that government has no role in their lives, I mean, they were very, very surprised during the shutdown. The extent to which federal government plays an important role in our lifestyle and our safety in the United States.
Representative Moore, if the Senate does not pass what the House passed last night, what happens? What's the next step? Does it go back to the Budget Committee? Does it come back to the House? What if the Senate adds unemployment extensions?
Then I guess we'll be called back. I mean, it's only the, we have a couple more weeks work. I certainly brought the new year in here last year, much to the chagrin of my daughter, whose birthday is January 1st, and she cried, "Mom, this is the first time in my life you haven't been with me on my birthday." And so we've done this before, and I would be happy to return for such a vote.
Finally, before we go to calls, and the numbers will be up on the screen if you want to continue to participate in our conversation on the budget agreement that the House passed and fiscal matters here in Washington. There are news reports that on that trip back from South Africa, you sat next to Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. Is that true?
It's only half true. The whole truth is I sat with him 20 hours to South Africa and then 20 hours back from South Africa, so it was 40 hours. We even slept there together side by side. So, he's a very friendly person, and we had side discussions together about very many things, school choice and school vouchers. Of course, I hail from Wisconsin, where that program emanated, and we talked about health care. Of course, our disagreements were predictable. We had many other members on the trip join in on those discussions. They were very candid, very blunt, I think I was disappointed a little bit with just how, as one of my colleagues observed during the discussion, that no matter how much sense you make, people have their ideological stance, they aren't going to be persuaded by any facts you present to them. So that was we had very good conversations about his family and his kids and my kids, and he's a pleasant person. I can see why people might have voted for him.
Does a conversation like that, does time spent like that, could that at some point lead to cooperation up there?
I do think that these codels are very important for building those kinds of relationships between people. At the end of our trip, he asked me if I were ready to convert to being a Republican. I said they'd have to change a lot in order for me to do that.
Gwen Moore is our guest, member of the Budget Committee, member of the Financial Services Committee, and the first call for her comes from Joe, who is a Democrat in the Bronx. Joe, go ahead with your question or comment.
Yeah, good morning, Peter.
Hi.
Good morning. Miss Moore, how are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
My name is, usually when I call, especially Peter is there, I'm glad to see him. I always say I'm Joe the counselor from the Bronx, not Joe the plumber.
Fantastic.
Because I'm the person that do the social work community-based organizations, just like President Obama. So I deal with helping people. So the less fortunate, so to speak. Now, what I really wanted to do, Ms. Moore, was to talk to the congressman that was before you, Congressman Owen, that was before you. Yeah. But I didn't get the opportunity, so I had to wait. Now, one of the things that I wanted to say to him, but I leave it alone, so I'm just talking to you a little bit now, is that when we look at the Republicans, when they talk about unemployment is not the way it's supposed to be 16%, if not. Now, when it comes to help the people that's unemployed, they say unemployment is going down, they don't need it. So these people are talking from both sides of their mouth, of course. Now, they talk about everybody got to, what we need to talk about is unemployment, everybody go back to work, everybody go back to work. Their go back to work is Keystone Pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline. Ma'am, the Keystone Pipeline is not going to help the people that need to work. That's just a few jobs for their friends that will give them back money every 2 years, every 4 years, and every 6 years.
So, Joe, what would you like to see done?
What I would like to see done, really, is to pass all the employment that the president have come up with. So,
Okay, Joe,
Joe, thank you, sir.
Joe, you've made some really good points that everybody is not going to benefit from just one sector being funded, like the Keystone Pipeline, if that were to pass. And you make the point about the jobs bill that the president has put together that would more universally spread the benefit across the country. And of course, we haven't been able to get the House to take up that legislation at all. As a matter of fact, we've had like over 40 votes to repeal the Affordable Care Act, but we can't get the jobs bill on the floor. And so I'm glad that you raised that point. With regard to unemployment being at 16%, I mean, that would be catastrophic. That would be more than a depression. 7%. About where we're now is as much as I think we can tolerate. And it's certainly a threshold at which we ought to be looking at extending unemployment benefits. People are not working because they're just lazy bums that don't want to work. And as a matter of fact, if I could just speak for some Republicans, you know, their argument is that, there's so much uncertainty in the economy and people don't want to invest and people don't want to create new jobs and they've got trillions of dollars sitting on the sideline. These are dollars that would and could and should and ought to be spent to employ people. So people are not unemployed because they want to be unemployed. It's for any and all of the reasons. We don't have a jobs package. Employers are not doing it because of uncertainty. We're in a recession. And so these people deserve, especially at this time of year, some decent treatment. I think it's really interesting in that in this budget bill that we passed, we were concerned about not depriving doctors of the doc fix and the benefits they would receive, at the higher end of the income spectrum in our economy. But for those people who are unemployed, we're just leaving them in the lurch. Thanks for calling, Joe.
Representative Moore, I want to show you this from yesterday. This is Speaker Boehner talking about health care. I want to get your reaction to it.
Okay.
So no, we've spent the last year trying to protect the American people from the consequences of this health care law. And if you look toward next year, we're going to continue to look for ways to protect the American people from what's happening out there. But as you've seen, the House has acted 50 times over the last couple of years to try to protect the American people. None of these bills have moved through the United States Senate. All of them drew veto threats from the White House. Elections have consequences.
Representative Moore.
Well, I just noticed that Speaker Boehner used the word protecting and consequences several times during that particular segment. He's going to protect the American people from this health care law. That just it doesn't even pass the laugh test, Peter, because, the Affordable Care Act, like it or not, with all of the mess, with the horrific rollout, and I want to know what happened that it was so awful. But even given that, you find that millions of people are flocking to the website. People have found out that they're eligible for Medicaid. They found out they've shopped and they've gone. We've had 4 times the number of people in November who signed up for this health care law as in October. It's really on a trajectory to get people to do it. We've had 40 million people visit the sites. And this proves to me that this is a commodity that people need. Think about it. The #1 cause of bankruptcy in this country, Peter, was people's health care. Think about it. Starting 2014, with those 17 million children that can't be denied health care because of pre-existing conditions, we now are going to include adults in that number. This was something that was preventing people it was increasing the morbidity and the mortality rate. I personally know women who've shown up in the emergency room with 4th stage breast cancer because they didn't have a job, they didn't have any health insurance, and they either had no insurance or had these horrific plans with $1,500 deductibles, so they waited until they were too sick to be helped. That's going to stop. This is a commodity that is going to save not only money, but save lives. And so he's protecting us from that? No, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And elections do have consequences. And I tell you, it's the by some miracle, Democrats kept hold of that United States Senate. And if we see that United States Senate go, it's not just this Affordable Care Act and the White House go. We're not only going to see the the Affordable Care Act go, but Republicans, even with this deal, are lamenting over the fact that they haven't been able to decrease benefits for Social Security recipients, and they haven't been able to decrease benefits for Medicare recipients. So you're going to see Medicare and Social Security come under the axe, along with food stamps and all the other so-called mandatory entitlement programs. This is the heartthrob of the Republican Party and their billionaire supporters, is to downsize or eliminate these programs. So, yeah, I agree with him on that. Elections have consequences, and thank God we were able to reelect President Obama and keep the United States Senate.
Politically, though, health care has not been good to the Democrats, has it?
You mean as an issue?
Has it been damaging to the Democrats?
Well, of course. I mean, the rollout of it's more than an embarrassment. It was a travesty. The millions of dollars that were spent on whatever contractor had the contract to put the healthcare exchange together. Boy, I wish I had had that contract. I couldn't have done worse, I don't think. But despite that, that has not discouraged 40 million people from looking at it. And I can't believe that they're all anti-Obama folks that have visited it. There are people who really need health care, and for the first time in their lives won't be facing bankruptcy in order to get the health care that they need. This is proof. The proof is in the tasting, and people are tasting this.
Gwen Moore, this is a tweet from Demental. What are you telling the unemployed in your district after voting not to extend benefits?
I did not vote not to extend benefits. I voted to get $63 billion in sequester relief for my constituents. I care very deeply about the unemployed. I care about those Head Start children slots. I care very deeply about the educational programs that have been defunded as a result of the sequester. There have been many, many people who have suffered. There's going to be $63 billion in relief from the sequester. And $63 billion is a big chunk of change that has harmed people across the economic spectrum, and including unemployed people, because there's unemployed people who've had a double hit. I mean, they've got kids in Head Start, for example, and they're unemployed. And so I appreciate the fact that the unemployed out there are going to suffer in the short term. But we can come back in January. We can come back before December 31st and backfill. Chairman Ryan left the door open in a comment that he made through the press yesterday that impressed me. Saying that he was willing to talk about it. He's willing to look at it. People bring him a deal. So I'm hoping that those back channels will continue to work throughout this break. Thank you for the call.
And in fact, the last time you were on, you told us about flying back to Wisconsin often with Paul Ryan. And you do a lot of work on airplanes, it sounds like.
Well, I think that, the one thing, the big difference that I see in Paul Ryan and some of his other colleagues is that while he is, he has been fed the ideology of the far right, he also can think. And sometimes you can break through with a person who actually thinks things through instead of just forming, an ossified taking an ideological stance. And so I'm relying on that right now, Paul.
Andy is in Brookville, Pennsylvania, Republican. You're on with Representative Moore, Democrat of Wisconsin.
Hi, Paul.
Hello,
Andy.
Representative.
Andy.
Yes. With President Obama calling himself the education president when he first took office, and with the all of the education that is in with the quality of education, the cost of the universities going quadrupling in all of the and education in the United States dropping to number 25 across the entire across everywhere across the country. In your own state, the quality of education dropping. The black youth in the country the employment for the black youth has just gone through has gone up to about 16%. And now with the budget deal being passed and the amount of money being spent for, as you said yourself, we're trying to get qualified people into positions. What is in this budget deal that is going to make it so that we can find any kind of money and relief for education for black youth, and to find money and to put placement into any kind of education through this budget deal, and for all of the placement for qualified people, and to get placement into places for education?
I think we got the point, Andy. Representative Moore.
Thanks for this call, Andy. You know, with the $63 billion in sequester relief, what it does is it gives appropriators, and I'm not an appropriator, but it gives appropriators in the House of Representatives the flexibility to fund and defund various programs. And one of the hardest appropriations bills to pass was the education and labor bill. Because of the great need, as you've pointed out, and demand for that. With regard to our being, 20th, I think it might even be further down than that in the STEM education around the world, we definitely need to prioritize funding educational opportunity. And the reason we're so far down is because for years we've relied on just the trust fund kids. The rich kids who could go to college, they've always gone to college and to community colleges. Our educational programs ought to be geared, as they do in many countries, in the best and the brightest, because God doesn't distribute intelligence just based on your family's 1040. And so unless we are able to reach down into some of those minority groups, and I would include that with some of our new immigrants, Latinos, and so forth, rural whites, it's not just black people, unless we're able to identify those kids, fund programs like TRIO and Upward Bound, stuff that has worked very well with routing out the talented among the poor. Unless we're able to do that, we're going to continue to not lead the world, and we need to continue to lead the world in innovation. And so I'm glad that you called, Andy.
Gwen Moore, tell us about your district.
I represent the coolest district in America, I think. It's the city of Milwaukee, and then there's a suburban spur on the northern end, some of the highest income suburbs in the entire state of Wisconsin on the northern end. And then I have suburbs on the southern end that are adjacent to Paul Ryan's district. And so I'm between Representative Sensenbrenner and Paul Ryan, right there in beautiful Lake Michigan. So my favorite thing to represent is Lake Michigan. I represent a very diverse community. It has a large Jewish community on the northern end. It has hard-working ethnic groups on the southern end of it, the largest African-American population in the state of Wisconsin, a lot of progressives, and it's a joy. And on my worst day in Washington, it's a joy serving the 4th Congressional District of Wisconsin.
What's the unemployment rate?
The unemployment rate is among, if you tease out minorities, it's higher than the national average. And it is right at the national average. So it's really a big problem. We still rely in my district on manufacturing as one of the largest employers, and to the extent that that there's any kind of decline in manufacturing, it harms our district. We also suffer tremendously from not having good transportation systems. This is one of my biggest beefs with our governor, who doesn't want to expand public transportation systems, because a lot of our constituents are locked into the central city Milwaukee with no real capacity to travel outside of that area to some of where there are opportunities in what we call the WOW region, and that's the Waukesha, Washington, Ozaukee County, more opulent areas surrounding Milwaukee County. And so this is where I really have a beef with many of my Republican friends and certainly with the governor. And the fact that transportation, which had always been the great bastion of bipartisan agreement, has now gone awry. These do-nothing Congresses that we're seeming to have, this is a double-dip hit on unemployment in my district.
For people who don't know your history, what should they know about you?
Oh, man, what they ought to know is that I'm a very hardworking person, that I'm a mother of 3, grandmother of 3 granddaughters, that I can really identify with people who are suffering and struggling. I've been unemployed. I've been on welfare. I have gotten scholarships to go to college. I've benefited from publicly funded education. Nobody chose me, or I wasn't chosen, or had to pull a ticket or a number or get lucky. I was able to benefit from the public investments in me. And what they ought to know is that I've paid those back many more times in public service and tax dollars. You know, this is what we mean by investing in people. If you invest in people, there will be a dividend. And so I care very, very much about those people who are willing to work hard, willing to do their part, willing to pull their weight. Those are the people I'm rooting for to try to help.
When you were, as you say, on welfare, did you ever imagine that you'd be a member of Congress?
Oh, I never dreamed. No,
path?
it was not some aspiration I had. Matter of fact, I resisted going into public service. It was something my mother wanted me to do. You know, after I got to be in my 20s, and I told her that I thought she was nuts, that I would never do this. So never say never. But the tug of public service has been something in me. I love to give. I love to share. My leadership model is a giving sort of leadership, and I love public service. I think I'd be a great waitress. These would hold up. I love people, and I love public service. But you have to pay people who work in restaurants enough for me to go to work there. But I do it.
Gwen Moore is a graduate of Marquette University. The next call for her comes from Kelly in Bluefield, West Virginia, Democrat. Kelly?
Talk too long. Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
Please go. Kelly, you know what? We're going to put you on hold. You got to turn down that volume on your TV and just listen through the phone. I promise you'll be able to hear everything. Greg in Tarboro, North Carolina, independent line. Greg, we're listening. Go ahead.
Oh, hello, Representative. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Good. My question is, how are we? You know, it's a step in the right direction as far as trying to negotiate, but it's not even close as far as what's actually going on out here. And you know, case in point, I was contracted by this company that makes mind wave units. You know, it's a toy, but the science is real, and so is the business plan. Mm-hmm. And in the state of North Carolina, I mean, everyone I showed it to, they thought it was great. And the targeted marketing segment would have been the schools, hospitals, museums, anything instructional or educational, because it was open source. Mm-hmm. And the company, they really weren't concerned about, you know, copyright infringements, any modification that anybody made. They just wanted to know what it was so we could use it for advertising. Mm-hmm. That came after, I guess, a change with the governor. That hurt small business because the people who were interested in it before, after the sequester, they weren't interested.
Exactly.
It can still be done, but it's really time consuming. You have to travel a lot more. And my other question, while I'm moving around here is, and I'm going to be brief because I'm already late. How is it that they're focusing on, as far as taking money, how are they focusing on Social Security, and they're looking at the health care, and why don't they look at things like the Patriot Act, the National State Registry, the Division of Motor Vehicles?
All right, Greg, I think we got a lot on the table there. Representative Moore, anything you'd like to respond to?
Greg really makes an important point here when he talks about how the sequester has harmed research. This is something that, people don't necessarily feel, in the streets. But it's an important point because this is just the kind of innovation that we need to stay on top and to create jobs and to support small business, to keep people healthy, all the medical research that's being done. And research just can't wait for you to fund it 5 years from now. These projects stop. So I'm really glad that you called, Greg, to make that point. We are doing other things with the national security, and there are hearings and stuff going on about that. But what you need to know about Social Security, I mean, people said, why did the robbers rob the banks? Because that's where the money was. Was it Jesse James? Because people see a cash cow, because we do have a surplus in Social Security. And in Medicare, these are mandatory funded programs. They weren't subject to the sequester. And Republicans and their billionaire friends, quite frankly, they want to get a hold of this cash and cut benefits for seniors. The Democrats have said, these are our sacred cows. We're not going to touch it. We would rather see more tax revenue from the businesses that can afford to do it, less sort of tax breaks for gas and oil and petroleum and fossil fuel products and jet planes. And so this is an ideological argument that didn't become a part of the sequester deal. This is, I'm not touting this sequester deal, Greg, as some big, massive, grand bargain. It isn't. All it does is shows that there's some basic movement and some goodwill to at least have some conversations.
So with this deal, is the Budget Committee going to be active in the coming year at all? Or is it pretty much
this at
done
least
with its
gives
work?
the appropriators a pot of money to raise those levels. It takes them out of the absolute bind that they were in. The chairman of the Appropriations Committee said that the 967 number was just not enough money to run basic services in government. That it was dangerously funded so low, which is why we didn't pass the 12 appropriations bills. It just was not enough money. And so this sequester relief would at least give the appropriators some wiggle room to try to move things around for 2 years.
Wild and wonderful tweets into you, Ms. Moore. What can government end the sense of hopelessness that often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy for the poor?
This is a democracy, and I have seen it work. Even under these circumstances, I mean, we thought we couldn't pass the Violence Against Women Act. But we had Native Americans pour in here, women's organizations pour in here, the LGBT community come in. We had people just continue to pound on the government until the leadership in the House of Representatives had to yield. We've seen it when we were about to march into Syria. We saw the American people just spontaneously erupt in objecting to this, and we saw the president back away from his resolve to do this. So democracy does work, and I think that what we have got to do is we've got to have that same sort of public swell around the poor. What upset me more than anything, since I have been in politics, I was a state legislator, was when I watched Democrats and Republicans do their kumbaya on throwing women and children off of assistance. And everybody thought that was just so cool. And now that base of poor people has expanded beyond women and children and to now men who are unemployed and men who had been happily employed and now find themselves victims of a recession. And, you know, we find so many millions of Americans relying on nothing but food stamps. I think we should now have the critical mass so that people ought to say, look, we're still Americans. And, you know, we want to be treated with dignity, even though we don't have jobs and work. You know, we want our government to step up and give us some basic human dignity. And it needs to be a movement. Thanks for that question.
Kelly, Bluefield, West Virginia Democrat. Please go ahead, Kelly. We are listening.
Yes, I've been watching a lot of news, and a lot of times we'll hear on the news bridges are beyond repair in the United States. Unemployment is running rampant. And then in the next breath, we'll hear, well, we're giving $2.5 billion to Pakistan. We're giving so many billions of dollars to Egypt or whatever. To fix the problems in this country, we need to quit giving our tax money to other countries. We could fix the unemployment rate. We could fix a lot of problems in this country if we quit giving the tax money away that our own people are paying.
Well, thanks for this call, Kelly. I mean, yes, bridges are collapsing. We saw that bridge collapse in Minnesota. That could have happened anywhere. Up in, including my district, we have a bridge that is very vital to our economy that's fallen apart, which is one of the reasons that we need a transportation appropriations bill. I am sorry to tell you that our foreign aid is only about 1% of our budget. That 1% would not fix all the bridges and take care of all the poor and fix our educational system. But that 1% does buy us quite a bit of goodwill. You think about the aid we give to Egypt. I mean, look at how, you know, Egypt has been, and we don't know what the future holds, but it's been one of our biggest helps in our ally Israel. Israel values the relationship that they have had with Egypt. And so when we give foreign aid to Egypt, we're helping Israel. A lot of our biggest foreign aid goes, in fact, to Israel for their military capacity. Like General Colin Powell once said, if you break it, you have to fix it. I mean, we went into Iraq, places like that, and found out, wow, there really were no weapons of mass destruction, but we just left collateral damage there with women and children and widows, in fact, and orphans. And so should we not do something, give some penance to help those people? We broke it, and so now we need to fix it. We only spend 1% of our budget, 1%, and that amount is under threat. As we find people object to even giving that, and it buys us a great deal of goodwill. There are also security agreements that we have with various countries. We do have Americans who live abroad and need those protections. And so I appreciate your call too, Kelly.
And speaking of budget, Irish Boy tweets into you, the DOD is the elephant in the room when it comes to the budget.
Okay, Irish Boy. Well, one thing that I'm really happy to say is that with this sequester relief, that it literally went about half and half, the sequester relief. I think there are many more Republicans that might have enjoyed seeing that being, top heavy with defense, but it really was a split 50-50. There are far fewer Republicans that are defense hawks than we thought there would be. And I agree with you. Even people in the armed services are telling us, we don't need this plane anymore. I've learned so much from, my association when I was a state legislator, Will and Juan, that we've got World War I weaponry that we're still financing in the name of economic development. And it's really hard to get rid of these projects because many of my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, have districts where there are jobs being created to make stuff that is obsolete at this point. And so we really do need to become leaner and meaner. I laughed so hard when President Obama during the debates talking about how we didn't need bazookas anymore. And it's true. We just don't need bazookas.
Who's the biggest employer in your district?
The Milwaukee Public Schools is a big employer in our. We also have some healthcare services. Assurant Healthcare is a big employer in our. We still have manufacturing, still a big base there. We've got international companies, Johnson Control, Badger Meter, A.O. Smith. So we have, we've got, we've got Caterpillar, that's in Paul Ryan's district, but it's right on the border. So we still rely heavily on manufacturing in my district. Potawatomi Nation, Forest County Potawatomi, is a huge presence in Milwaukee proper, and they provide a lot of jobs to minorities, and they provide health care.
Larry, Kaiser, West Virginia, is calling on a Republican line. Larry, please go ahead.
Yes, Representative, I'd like to say that I think it was good for you to vote on the new budget deal. And I think as far as unemployment, I believe in letting people have extensions, but every time there's an extension, the amount they get should be reduced by like 20%. And as far as the budget, what I would like to see is do away with baseline budgeting where it goes up automatically and do the penny proposal where every dollar gets cut 1 penny until we balance the budget. And the third thing I'd like to comment on is I feel everyone taxed. They should do away with tax-exempt foundations. People that receive the money on the national debt, they should pay tax on it. Charities, everyone should pay tax. And even the colleges. That's another big problem. The colleges have millions and millions of dollars in their annuities. The contributions to the annuities is tax-free. They have that money invested in Wall Street and everything else. They make millions of dollars in interest off the money they have invested, and they pay no taxes on it. If everyone paid their fair share, the country will be much better off. If I put $20 in the bank and I get interest, I show it on my taxes, and these other people get interest, lifetime interest. And the other thing I'd like to comment, I don't think most people know that our country, even when things were good, we never paid the interest on the national debt from the First World War, and in 3 more years we'll be able to celebrate paying interest on the debt from the First World War for 100 years. I'd like to know how much interest we have paid in the 97 years we've been paying interest on the
All right, Larry, we got a lot on the table there. Representative Moore.
Okay, Larry, let's get started here. This is a very complicated economic theory that you have brought forth, and so I'm very interested in some of your ideas. I mean, if we got away with charities, that would, first of all, I think that would infringe on the First Amendment. If everybody had to pay taxes, I mean, would we be actually asking synagogues and the Catholic Church and all of them to pay taxes? Would we not allow people tax exemptions on their tithing that they do, or their that they do through their church, or I don't know, Muslims pay, I think they call it the zakat. So we'd run into some real First Amendment infringements if we were to do that. With regard to unemployment being reduced 20% every time we give it, I mean, that's very interesting, because I don't think landlords or the mortgagers are going to reduce that they have for those people. So they already don't get enough to sustain themselves, so I don't know how that would work out for them. In terms of base budgeting and reducing the base each time, I think that would, that adds to what I hear all the time from Republicans about creating uncertainty. I mean, what do you do when you are a school or a hospital or a private sector research-focused institution when you can't depend on, you get a 5-year award of a grant to research lung cancer, and you can't depend on that funding increasing with inflation. I mean, suddenly, your materials increase with inflation, but your grant doesn't. So these are very interesting economic theories that may help toward the deficit, but I don't know that it would help with any kind of economic growth.
And we have been talking with Representative Gwen Moore, a Democrat of Wisconsin, 4th District. Milwaukee area is her district. Let's finish where we started. Why did you vote for the budget agreement last night?
Yeah, I voted for it because I think that I'm a proud progressive. I'm a proud liberal. I didn't get everything I wanted. There's no point in me lying about that. I would have wanted to extend unemployment for sure to those, extend unemployment to those long-term unemployed people. I certainly didn't want to ding federal employees anymore, and I'm very, very skeptical about the delays in payments for Medicaid. That is disturbing me a great deal. But I've learned really the hard way, being in this Congress, that just being ideologically stuck is not workable. And to the extent that Republicans were able to, and Paul Ryan in particular, and Pat Murray, their leadership, leading the way, we've got to be responsible to the majority of the people in this country, and I'll continue to fight for those things. I think a door is open, and I think that I owed it to my constituents to show my willingness to stay at the table.
Gwen Moore, thanks as always for being on the
Peter.
Washington
It's always
Journal.
wonderful being here with you.